My name is Renee Fennell, and I work in the Alumni and Civic Relations Department at the University of Chicago in the Midwest and Southern Regional Office. Big love, big love. I just want to say good morning to everyone, and thank you again for coming out on this Saturday, glorious Saturday morning. This is the Alumni Club Best Practices session, and I've had the opportunity to work with Helen Probst Mills, who is AB 86, sorry. And she's the Alumni Club co-president for the North Carolina area. And Josh LeBeau, and I'm going to admit I don't know your degree, Josh.
AB 07.
AB 07. He's, Josh has been all over the place. Right now he's currently in New Hampshire, but he's helped us out a bit in Kentucky and worked with some folks in Ohio as well. They're both going to be some great assets for today's discussion. And I will just open it up real quick. And actually, we should do introductions first. And open it up to you all. If we could just have you go around, this worked in the last session, it gives us a really good opportunity to know who's here and where you're from, so we can answer some questions. But we really would like for this session to be conversational. I put the 4 points up there. If you could tell us your name, degree, the region that you're from, and the volunteer activity that you're associated with. Let's start here.
I'm Agnes Roach. I'm a founding member of the Chicago Women's Alliance and also a founding member of the University of Chicago Women's Business Group. For that group, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. And for the other one, we've been going for 4 years. My degrees are from the library school and from the food school. And I guess that's it. And well, we're based in Chicago, but we look to be international.
I'm Adrienne Nauman. I received my undergraduate degree in biology at the University of Chicago. Agnes is very accomplished and self-effacing. I'm on the board of the Chicago Women's Alliance. She is not just the founding member, she is also the president and really the spirit that moves us and sets a very nice tone. What else am I doing? Oh, I forgot to mention in the last session I was on our undergraduate reunion committee 5 years ago. And we have one coming up, but I think that was 5 years ago. I don't have to say anything about it. But then it turns out that one of the other lawyers here was, I didn't recognize him. He was co-chairman of the reunion group. He came over and asked me to do it this year. So I have those two things. And I'm a lawyer.
Hi, I'm Bill Grant, AB 01, and this is my wife Adele from the Speed Board, but we hold the same position. We're co-presidents of the Alumni Club of New York. I'm Darren Ricotta, and well, you can say your name.
Anything you'd like to add, Adele?
Yeah. Oh, great. College.
All right. Very good. So that's good. We can all learn from here. So volunteer activities
Morning, everyone. I'm Jerry Oberman. I have my PhD from the College of Education. I work with as membership chair with the Chicago Women's Alliance. My colleagues on the end of the table there here in Chicago.
My name is Sarah Saperstein. I work with Renee Fennell in the Midwest and Southern Regional Office, working with alumni relations, building alumni clubs and volunteer engagement in the Midwest area.
My name is Galina Chilov. I got my PhD from the GSB in 2003. I came to Hyde Park and here on the school and still have an opportunity to saw some community research classes here.
Perfect.
I'm Erin Kolchak, with graduate assistant here in Chicago, and I'm also on the board of the Chicago Women's Alliance, and I chair the Business Book Roundtable for the Booth School.
I'm Carrie Wilson. I've got a master's with a public policy degree, 99. I'm here now, but most of my volunteer activity was in Omaha. I just recently moved back from there.
And I'm Joe Walsh, history degree, 89 from the college, and I followed my Minnesota-born wife to St. Paul 5 years ago, and that's where I've done some union activities and some other things.
I can relate, so I guess I'll just wing it. My name is Donna Prestel. I have a master's degree from Geophysical Sciences. I am a PhD geologist and geotechnical engineer. I'm on the board of the Chicago Women's Alliance. I'm the programs chairman. And I was just busy trying to get us on the web. That's why I'm late.
My name is John Peterson. I'm a graduate of Booth School, 1989, located here in the Chicago area. And I am an officer on the Chicago Booth Alumni Club here in Chicago.
Michael Peters, graduated from the college in 1990 in New York, and was past president of the New York Club. I've been a volunteer on the reunion committee for many reunions, and I'm currently on the Alumni Board of Governors.
Matt Whitaker, MBA 1995. I'm currently the president of the Washington, D.C. Alumni Club, and I run the Booth Entrepreneurs Advisory Group in D.C.
David Simmons, College 75. I'm here in Chicago and just joined the board of the local alumni club.
Gabe Christensen. I graduated with Adele in 2003. And I live in DC, and I've been the program chair for the last 3 years, and I just became the vice president.
Just looking up for the t-shirt on my t-shirt contest, if you guys want to vote. I'm Sarah Toussaint, class of 2000 from the college. I am in staff as well. I cover the Boston and DC areas, or Mid-Atlantic and Midland areas.
Perfect. I think that it hits about everyone. So I'm just going to start the conversation by giving a very brief history of the alumni clubs and what the university has done for alumni clubs. And Michael Peters, who has been our moderator for our alumni club president calls, can jump in as well. I think he has a much closer understanding of the history of alumni clubs here at the University of Chicago. But up until recently, until about a year or two ago, the university worked with alumni clubs in a very loose way, especially the smaller alumni clubs, which, as you have a chance to look at this pretty meaty document of statistics of where our alumni are located and what types of degrees they have, you'll realize that there are a lot of places that have less than 1,000 people. You'll probably notice that a lot of regions aren't even covered on the second sheet of major domestic geographic concentrations. So that says a lot about where our alumni live. So accordingly, the university focused its efforts in major cities, so Chicago, New York, San Francisco, DC, LA, and now we can definitely see that that Boston, Seattle, Philadelphia, those are some other large regions for us. But we've had some pretty strong alumni club work in those very large regions because we have a lot of people there, as you can imagine, and a lot of different schools and divisions. Of course, that had alums there, so they focused on those areas as a priority. And about a year or two ago, we realized that, man, there's a lot of other alums out there, and they've been reaching out to us and talking to us, and they were asking a lot of questions that we didn't have answers for. So we started to pool together the information that we had and develop an alumni club handbook, which includes guidelines, some guiding principles for how to start up a club, how to maybe take a club that even in a large area might have only had a couple key volunteers maintaining it, how to build that a little bit more, provide some structure, to look at transition. I don't think there's anyone here in this room that fits this bill, but there are a lot of folks out there that would step forward and say, yep, I've been doing the alumni club work in my region for 15 years. It's been me, just me. Some of you might feel like that for different groups that you're working on as well, that you're the mainstay of that area. So the university ramped up its services, and we hired some more staff, like Sarah Toussaint and Sarah Saperstein to really help us reach out to other regions. So we have more staff, we have a little bit more structure, we've tried to provide some consistency, and with things like the Alumni Club President Conference calls, as well as this volunteer caucus, we're trying to build networks and connections. So we're paying attention to these places that are not maybe in the top 5 or 6, and hoping to provide you all with some best practices and networking so that you can feel confident in the work that you're doing and really feel great about being the local ambassadors for the University of Chicago. So that's the brief history. And from here, I'll let Josh and Helen take over.
I think, unfortunately, I'm not sure how relevant my remarks are to most of you because most of you are in much larger metropolitan areas. I'm not even in a metropolitan area. I moved to North Carolina about 5 years ago, and one of the first things I did was call the Alumni Association and say, where's my local group? And they said, well, there isn't one. And I said, well, surely there must be one in the state of North Carolina. You know, you've got Charlotte, a booming banking industry area, Raleigh with the research triangle area. No, there isn't one. So I started one because that's what people in Chicago do. So I'm the co-president now for about 1.5 years of the Alumni Association for the state of North Carolina. And I think that's a little bit different for most of you or for a particular metropolitan area, not for an entire state. But as the Alumni Association is going out into these smaller metropolitan areas, you really need to think about not just the concentration as we have of about 1,500 people in the triangle area in Raleigh, but the other 1,000 people that are dispersed across the state. You know, those people may, like I do, be willing to drive 1.5 hours to something because there isn't anything for them locally. So we also then have a unique situation in that the metropolitan area of Charlotte, which is about 2.5 hours drive, depends on how fast you go, from Raleigh, has another 1,000 or so alums in that area who are also interested and actually have a larger concentration of Booth alums, as you can imagine. And so the question is, how do you engage those people in a club that's so, you know, so dispersed and find ways to get them interested and involved? And I think that from my perspective, looking in on it, the guidelines and the bylaws were really a great place to start. You immediately had from the Alumni Association a structure that you were going to work towards in terms of number of executive officers, number of programs that they would help you put on. You also had the incredible support of the Alumni Association staff. I do other volunteer work, and I'd love to have Renee in my other roles because it's just, you know, you have a secretary behind you basically. And so as you know, the easy part is thinking up the ideas. The hard part is actually the legwork of putting it in place, which they do quite a lot of that. And then I think you also have clearly an understanding of what the objective is. You know, the Alumni Association in the guidelines clearly is laid out, you know, what they're hoping for the local clubs to accomplish in terms of the mission and how that fits within the UFC itself. And I think you could easily have people setting up groups and you know, for different reasons and different purposes, but this sort of keeps us all on the same railroad track, headed in the same direction. So we've found it to be very helpful. We haven't transitioned yet, and that I think is one of the biggest issues, as I would imagine for any club, is making sure to find active people who want to volunteer and step up and take on other roles. That's going to be our challenge this coming spring. But I think you will get people more involved and engaged by having this structure in place and by having this information at hand and the resource of the Alumni Association, and not a fear that they're falling into a job that's not clear and manageable, because obviously we don't all do this full time. The other thing that I think is important very much to keep in mind is the audience in terms of the schools they graduated from, in terms of the year. Ours is pretty evenly split if you look at the state. About 1/5 of ours are 2000, and then you go down by decade and you each take 1/5, and then 1960 and earlier is another 1/5. And obviously the type of event that you put on for grads from 2000 isn't necessarily going to appeal to your grad from 1949 and vice versa. And so you have to really be thinking about who your audience is, both in terms of, for us, where they're located, but in terms of what they might be interested in terms of the affinity group, but also what decade really they're from. And with the college class expanding, I think in a few years, the number of college alums is going to just really skyrocket in comparison to the other groups. And how's that going to make a change on what we do and the programs that we put on? and there'll be, you know, my fifth from 2000 is just going to grow. You know, 2000, we call the 2010 decade is going to become a much larger chunk of the percentage of the whole estate. And I think then the only other thing that I really wanted to mention is that and I think you probably might be able to provide more information about this. I think the biggest issue is really getting people to volunteer. And really, how do you get individuals who may be interested in one event to ramp that up to being interested in helping put on events and helping to think of events and then helping to actually run the club itself. And we've had in our, I guess maybe 7 events or so that we've had over a year and a half, we've had about 170 people participate, and many of them in multiple events, which is really great when you consider it. But we still don't have, I think once you have enough events going, maybe you can have the expectation of the frequency of events, and then therefore maybe people will begin to step forward because they see more things and they want to become involved. At least that's my hope. And then how that fits also within the Alumni Schools Committee. We have not had a regional director for the Alumni Schools Committee in our area, but we've just received news that we do have someone. And it was interesting, her email list of the people who do interviewing in our area didn't really match with the people who attended events. And you know, why is that the case? Because you would think that would be a natural fit. So I think that there are, the guidelines provide a great framework from which to launch yourself in your events and what you're interested in doing. But I think there are some more substantive issues that all of you being more established clubs would love your advice on.
Yeah, so I guess there are a few points that I wanted to talk about. One is sort of the resources that I have utilized in terms of trying to build clubs. I guess I'm someone who ends up going into small areas and trying to build clubs. You'd think to the chagrin of the Alumni Association, but they seem to be willing to participate in my recent moves. Folks like Sarah Saperstein and Sarah Toussaint make this possible. So I just want to talk a little bit about the resources that make the club happen and can make your club happen better. And then the event. I believe that you can put on an event and build an energy behind you. I think, obviously, you know, those of us that live in small regions, the regions were there long before we got there. And it becomes a process of trying to convince people that there's support, that there's facilities and people and resources behind you to do this. Otherwise, you are kind of out there by yourself. So first of all, I want to talk just briefly about some of those resources that I've taken advantage of, and hopefully you all know about these and are using them. But the Alumni Club conference call with presidents from across the country is, I think, a hugely valuable resource. It's something that I'm kind of spoiled by because it's been part of my process from the outset in starting a club in Kentucky. So I've always assumed that we had these calls, but correct me if I'm wrong, they weren't always part of the story, right? And so, needless to say, you know, when it's you know, February in Kentucky, we have a different set of meetings than they do in San Francisco or Los Angeles, and I get a little jealous when they tell me they're outside sunbathing. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to do something really important, which is lead the University of Chicago in places that aren't Chicago. And those of you that are from Chicago, I think, have a unique set of challenges as well. But trying to lead the University of Chicago and make it relevant in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and hear how that's going can be incredibly helpful. It can be elucidating in that way. It becomes this Chicago-style conversation. And we don't always see things the same way. I mean, these calls, I think, can get, as you would imagine, a Chicago-style conversation. They can get heated, and I've appreciated the fact that people are so heated about alumni club stuff. I mean, we should be angry. We should get intense and get excited about this stuff because we are the people who are going to bring it to our communities and become the brand of it before we can find a brand of it in our communities that are already there. So the Alumni Club President's Call helps immeasurably because it also gives you a sense of what's worked. And I remember kind of trading some results from an event that we had done with folks from another area who were putting on an event and hearing about things that they had done with their events that was incredibly helpful. Thinking about the way that they had engaged. Resource number 2, which really can't be underdone, which is the alumni staff, the Alumni Association staff, who maybe you've utilized, but maybe you haven't figured out a way to utilize enough. Again, I'm part of this spoiled generation that got to benefit from increased resources in alumni and constituent relations, but they really are here for you to build your club and to build your network. And they know what worked. They know what will work. And they'll help you. They'll give you some pushback and they'll help you plan an event that's practical, that's logical, and they'll help you set realistic goals. I remember we were trying to put on an event in Louisville, and I remember saying to Sarah Saperstein, I remember saying, oh, I guess we could have, like 90 people show up. Seemed reasonable. I'd never been to a college event that was small, right? I mean, people love the University of Chicago in Chicago. We'd fill Ida Noyes. It seems reasonable. We can get 90 people. Well, there are 350 who live in the surrounding area. 90 would show up, right? And, clearly kind of setting goals and expectations based upon history is important. No, 90 people are not going to show up to your event in Louisville, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that your event isn't important, isn't valuable, and isn't providing a significant service to the alumni in that area and to the university. And I think the alumni staff do a good job of reminding you that you're both engaging the community in something incredibly important, a Chicago connection, but you're also engaging with the university and expanding its message in places that it just can't reach. So that's resource number 2. And then I guess to all of that, I say you just have to kind of do it. So we planned an event in Kentucky. Let's say 90 people didn't show up. I think we had 30, but 30 very, very happy people. And if you build it, they'll come, right? I think in a lot of areas that I've been now in New Hampshire, people kind of have a yeah attitude. I'll believe it when I see it. Maybe in Chicago or New York, you all are over-programmed, but in some of the smaller regions, we're not over-programmed. And I think there's a skepticism of some of the folks who have been there a long time that, all right, young whippersnapper, you're going to come in and program an event. I'll get on board when it works. Well, they will get on board when it works, and it may mean a little bit of heavy lifting at the beginning. But if you can put on an event, one that people like, well, they'll want to do that again because you've given them something. You gave them a party. And then secondly, they see that there's vitality and there's energy and there's trajectory to what you're doing. So it was very quick thereafter that first event that people were saying, I want to do this and I want to do that. Everyone wants to be on a winning team, right? So it's really easy to begin mapping out your course. And maybe that's not the suggestion for every club, go out there and throw an event on. But it worked, and I think it continues to be kind of a great operating ethos. If you can pull together a couple of people, so you're not doing it alone and you don't fall into burnout, then you can get some energy behind you and show people this is real, and we have staff who care about us. Because I think the issue that I always ran into, being young and still very enchanted with the university, is that all these folks from the university just want to help us have fun. And some of the more senior folks in the community would say, no, they want my money. And, well, maybe, but first they want us to connect. They want us to know each other. They want us to know each other, and that's really what I want. As a young alum, I want to know that you're in my community, and I want you to help me. I had a job. I didn't need you to help me get a job, but I wanted you to help me fall into these communities, particularly as a young alum. So when I find myself in these small areas, I'm always thinking about the young alum from the perspective of the rhetoric that we were under in kind of CAPS and as college students was you made it when you were working in New York or you were working for Google, and I'm the Google success story of having applied 18 times for a job there thanks to the University of Chicago alumni, and having not yet received an offer to move out to Mountain View. I still find myself in small club areas, places like New Hampshire now, where I think the kind of boundaries of success feel differently. Right? We're not working for McKinsey. We're not lawyers. We're not bankers. And I think as young alums from the college, we're still kind of unsure where that places us in the kind of global identity of young alums who are basically living in the cities, really staying connected and doing a lot of young alum kind of stuff. And I found that we moved to these places not because, we didn't make it, but because we really found something that called us back to these small communities. And we want to connect with the more senior alums, whether they're professional school or graduate school or even college alums in the area, because there's a unique narrative that transcends the generations. That's University of Chicago. And that's what I love. That's what I love about going to alumni events that are across the board for University of Chicago alumni. Sometimes if you get together at a young alumni event, it can be a little draining. And so I love going back to these smaller events in the region and knowing that the University of Chicago story is more transcendent and more powerful, and that's what brings people together. I think ultimately, I realized that no alumni club can work with just young alums. They'll just eat each other up. And no alumni club can work with just senior alums. In a lot of respects, it requires a balance of both. I think North Carolina speaks to the grand ideal. And it will depend largely on the sort of the demographics of your area. But realizing how to build the connection across the major divisions that I think we let ourselves fall into is important. Use the resources that are there, but I think also once you start, it just quickly becomes a matter of energy. And the last thing I would say is the less and less that it becomes about you, and that you take any kind of personal success or personal failure in what you do. I felt at some point that I had so much writing. I had told people there was going to be this party. If it didn't work, would Sarah Saperstein still staff us? Would she still care? Would she still take our phone calls? And the truth is yes. Fail. Use the university's money and fail. Because you'll come to the conference calls and you'll give us good stories to move forward with. Because there are things that we did dead wrong that night, and there are things that we did really well. Maybe we shouldn't have had the coat rack out by the book sales, and you only learn that afterwards. And I think the less that you make it about you and a sort of a personal, validation point, and you just kind of give in to the enterprise, it's fun. It should be fun. If you ever look back from planning an alumni club event and you go, God, that's really tiresome. Why do I do this? You're not necessarily engaging with it in the way that I hope you will. So find an opportunity to let this be larger than yourself, because at the end of the day, the University of Chicago is larger than all of us.
Well, so I wonder if we can try and open this up a bit. You have in front of you some alumni club structural key points, and they definitely go along the comments that were just made about structure and having some people that are doing it with you. I mean, there's a couple Chicago Women's Alliance people here. You guys know that you can't do it alone. There's 5 of you in this room. So you definitely need to have plenty of people to make it happen, so it's not just you. We need a little bit of rotation, right? I'm sure you all haven't been doing the same thing the whole time. I heard that somebody's moving from program chair to vice president. So you get a little taste of something new. New presidents are in roles here too as well. And that we need to think about what Helen brought up, which is how do you engage those folks that attend an event and have an idea and have a little bit of energy and move them to the next level. So I wonder if we could open that up right now to moving folks to the next level and making sure that they are finding it to be very fun and they are thinking about the larger community and the different demographic for whatever region they're in.
Well, people in my group are probably going to think I'm repeating myself because I've heard this before, but I learned a lot of things that both of you have validated, all of you have validated, from the tenure I just completed at another university on their alumni association, University Alumni Association Board, where I was on the executive committee and I was chairman of the governance committee, so I had a pretty good idea to see what everybody said at the vice president and trustee level, what their attitude was towards engaging alumni and, of course, raising money. And I think that, you two folks touched on it, and it's a very important point, which is why I wanted to say something about it again, and that is, it seems to me intuitively obvious, especially as a business person and built my business from the ground up, that before you ask people for money, you should show them what's in it for them. That, to me, I don't have an MBA from any place, like a lot of these other people, but having been in business, it seems to me, you have to get people's respect and trust and appreciation before you ask them for money. Because I don't want to get into it in too much detail. I've seen it done the other way around. People you've never heard of or never did anything, they never did anything for you, or you never heard from their alumni office, all of a sudden they want thousands of dollars. And they really haven't done anything to make you feel comfortable or appreciative. That's probably the biggest mistake a university can make, or the alumni groups of sponsors can make. But I'm very happy to see and to observe when I'm here that at least people seem to have that sequence right.
I think they knew that I didn't have thousands of dollars, so they took that conversation right off the table.
Well, sometimes they figure out how much money they think people can give. So the only thing left to do, which in my mind is the big part, is how to get these people to write the check. Yeah, you know how much they have, but what are you going to do to motivate them to write the check? If they think you're just a bunch of people that really didn't care about them or provide services for them, and now they're asking you for money, they're going to be furious. They're not going to give you money. You're going to lose goodwill.
I think you're right. Goodwill and engagement. You can't begin to ask anybody for money until you've built that. And I personally don't believe that the Alumni Association is only about fundraising. I do think that it is also about, I think the conversation last night about what's the brand, building the brand and sending the brand out. I think there's an aspect of that, but I also think there's an aspect of continuing to ensure that this is an interesting place full of interesting people. And you can do that both by giving up your time and of your money. I'm a firm believer that if you've not engaged people, you can't ask them. You'll put them off completely. And the question is then, how do you make sure that you've engaged them in a way that they find fulfilling and that they find rewarding and that they want to continue to be engaged, because it's only after that process has gone through over a period of time that they will then want to give. And it's not, I don't know how high on the list you may have an internal priorities list for the Alumni Association, but I personally am not of the opinion that it's only about fundraising. I think a lot of it is about, this kind of event about building the university in terms of being the place that it is.
And I think making it pertinent in places other than Hyde Park, which can be about money, but doesn't have to be about money. I don't think either of the stairs have ever asked me for $1 smartly, because they don't have it. But I think it really becomes a process where the university invests in its people continuously. I think there was probably a time when we put our money and our resources behind the faculty, we let them kick our butts for 4 years and then move us out, and then invest in a new group of kids. And I think the university realizes that the education of its alumni, they consider the best and the brightest when we got here, is part of the process, that you are always a University of Chicago alum, and that requires a sort of a mutual responsibility. We don't ever shed that. If you want to give because of that, that's a great thing, but I think it also means that we want to inform you about the current University of Chicago. We want you to invest in the present University of Chicago, and that means programming, that means connecting, that means events like this, but I think it's important that we get people on board and aware of what the University of Chicago means today and tomorrow. And I think that the alumni office is ready to do that far quicker and far sooner than it says, hey, how about donating some money? Still, if you'd like to donate money, there's easy ways to do that. So.
I wanted to speak to the comments you made about picking your demographic. Okay, the Chicago Women's Alliance focuses on women with significant life experience. Everybody like that phrase? Mm-hmm. In any case, we worked really hard on that, right, Agnes? But the thing is, of course, everybody is welcome at our events, and it's very interesting to see the response of people who come. And the best ones are the men who win the drawing with their business cards. Can I really win? Yes, and you can win 2 months in a row. And also, but the young alumni were the most interesting, because what happened is I met a young alum last year at the reception that was at the Quad Club. And she came up to me like this, and she said, I'm not happy because yours is focused towards older alums. I said, well, the young alumni have a group of their own, and we are the forgotten ones. We're tired of being the forgotten ones, so we're starting, okay? So she said to me, well, the young alumni only go to the bar. I said, well, tell them you don't want to go to the bar, okay? But so she came, and I said, you're welcome to come. It's just that we're going to be a little bit older than the people that you graduated with. And so she came in and she looked around the room, and I don't think she believed me. And so she did come, and obviously everybody is welcome. But it's very tricky to see the response of alums when it's not their particular demographic, and they are interested in the topic. And we've had absolutely no issue whatsoever with men and whatever, but it tends to be a group of people that did not graduate after 2000. And it's interesting, I was wondering what your comment would be about what to do with the fact that the young alumni group needs some other activities because they're looking to us.
Well, I think they should look to you. I don't know much about your club, but my first question when I heard all these Chicago women's folks in the room was, what a resource for the women that I graduated with to have that kind of energy behind them. Because what I look to when I go to alumni club events is the folks who have made it through this toughest part of my life, disenchanted from the real world. I look to older alums to let me know that the University of Chicago is still relevant and still going to get me through the shakier times in our lives when overdraft protection becomes an everyday word. So I think that as a club, as someone who's got experience working with a particular affinity group, you're in a position to say to young women, come, hear our stories, hear what makes the University of Chicago still important, still valuable to all of us. I think those conversations are transcendent and important, and maybe not easy, but I think once you set them up, more valuable, more significant than a lot of other things that can be done. I think we spend a lot of time talking about young alum stuff and just kind of doing stuff for young alums. And you're right, to a large extent, they just want to go to the bar sometimes. But sometimes they do want to talk about, why did we do this? Why were we here? What were we a part of? What was it like to take human being and citizen 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? The fun thing about going to the University of Chicago and being an alum from the college is that we share so much. We share far more than we don't share. And as women, you share a whole lot more than you share with the older men.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. I don't want to focus too much on women. Having been a PhD student in geology, really, I was there with the men, right?
Right.
Okay. So men are my buddies. They don't bother me at all. However, but I did want to say that it's very important to have a connection with the University of Chicago, and also, we never use a speaker that does not have a University of Chicago affiliation. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's, I think, something that works for us, and I think the young alumni should consider that because it's an integral part of our group.
And I think I've seen young alumni events in art galleries that use, the Cincinnati Club is a great example of this. That I don't know that I would call them particularly young, but they have a mix of recent alums and more senior alums, but building upon the brain trust of Miami University and the University of Cincinnati, they're never without an alumni speaker for an event. When we planned an event in Kentucky, we pulled in the guy who's been snapping around photos in here, Dan Dry, who does all the photos for the alumni magazine. Maybe not UFC degree, but certainly spent more time on the co-op than a lot of us. I think a lot of clubs are pulling in UFC folks. And I guess my challenge back to you, and to the young alums too, would be to find ways to make the conversation transcend. I think that young alums are not the enemy of senior alums, nor are senior alums the nemesis of young alums.
In fact, and there's no reason that they don't infringe on each other, they complement each other.
They should,
yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
But her thing.
Earlier in the discussion, I seen we turned into a fundraising thing. I've been involved with our alumni club here in Chicago. We're a separate organization, separately incorporated. And probably over the last 10 years that I recall, we have never, ever broached the topic of fundraising as a club, either for our own purposes or for the larger university. I would guess I could probably speak on behalf of our board system. We would pummel somebody who would come on to think about that. Our whole focus as a club has been to really try and give, just a really fun, meaningful type of experience that keeps people connected to both Booth and hopefully to the larger University of Chicago. I think there's been a lot of research done. I haven't researched this, but I've heard of this kind of anecdotally, that the people who really make contributions to their alma maters are those who are really engaged. And so I really think that the role of a lot of alumni clubs is get your fellow, your cohort, your fellow graduates engaged, and let somebody else make the ask. Because I know in our club, maybe once or twice, I've had people come to my office from the university, I think, kind of hoping I'd open up my checkbook. And I remember telling somebody who's no longer here very nicely, that's not what I'm going to give. And I'd be surprised if very many people would give that way at all. I really, when we started talking about fundraising, I found the hackles going up on the back of my neck, because I don't think that's the role of an alumni club. But if maybe a more proper role, this is just an opinion, is that you just get your fellow alums really engaged, and then just naturally fundraising will occur. And somebody else should make the
If you have good communication with alumni staff again. I mean, hey, if you've got a billionaire in your region and you live in the Corn Belt, I wholeheartedly encourage you to connect them with the folks who work in Alumni House on Michigan Avenue, and connect them with some folks who can make this university a richer place.
The university does that exceedingly well.
Yes. They do it exceedingly well, and they don't need our help in that. And I think that I would say, friend raise and let the university fundraise. If someone comes to you with an American Express black card and they say, where can I raise my money? Direct them back to the alumni staff who are happy to.
I'll do that one.
Yeah.
I want to respond actually to both the comments. First, I think we missed the point with that young female that was at this event. My response to her would have been, okay, so you're a young alum, why don't you lead an event? I think our job as leaders is to make it easy for volunteers to step up and to find volunteers. So there's a lot of people that show up and they complain, well, I'm here, but I really want this, or I want you to do this. You got to grab those people and make them into volunteers. And I think that's our job as leaders. I think that's Sarah's job as our
Have you found that, I'm looking for advice, have you found that to be a successful way to get people to be involved?
Well, some people will always just be complainers and will never step up. But in Washington, we've been pretty proactive in reaching out to people that show up on a regular basis, people that show up at the programming meetings. Gayan worked very hard to get out of her role by finally grabbing someone that showed up a lot and putting him in that role. So that would have been my response.
Well, I did suggest, why didn't she start something within the young alumni group? And that wasn't what, it seemed to me that was the obvious thing. But what ended up happening is that they came to ours, which is fine.
Right.
But the point is, if that's what you want, you need to stop complaining and do it, right?
Well, right, and then just one other comment about Booth. I'm a Booth grad, and GSB, as it was back then. And most of my classmates do not generally consider themselves part of the University of Chicago community. They consider themselves a Booth alum.
Yeah.
So, you know, Booth has their own strong alumni activity. And I think especially the people in the small regions, you have to be aware of that and reach out to include them. We do that in DC, and we have one of the largest, you know, if you look at the demographics, we have one of the larger populations. And even with that large population, it's hard to run an event without inviting everyone if you want to get critical mass. So certainly if I were in New Hampshire or some small community, you've got to, you just put University of Chicago on it, and you don't reach out to Booth, or you don't get Booth people on your board, then people aren't going to show up because they think that's for all those undergrads, whatever. I'm not from there. And I think the law school, frankly, is probably even worse for, you know, their alums feeling like I'm a law school alum, not a member of the University of Chicago.
But I think that's very true. If you are in Chicago where there's a lot of critical mass for Booth events, getting to a Booth event is pretty often tricky. And I've actually been told that since I'm not a Booth alum, I'm not welcome.
Oh, that's not true.
You know, so, call who? What?
No, I just said that's not true.
Oh, it is true. I can tell you.
But it's
but I'm just saying, you know, it's just like everybody, it's very compartmentalized, and I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to come today to this particular session is that I wanted some people from your group to make the connection with Booth such that it's easier. You know, I have enough friends now in Booth that I can get in usually as a guest, but not always. Okay, and so
are they throwing swankier parties? Is that why we're trying to get in, or what's the?
Pardon me?
Are they throwing swankier parties? What's
well,
the
they
story?
throw some pretty swanky parties. No.
Well, and I just want to clarify real quick that the Alumni Club is open to all alumni, parents, and friends from every school division program. If you attended Graham School and got a certificate, you are welcome to. Everything that says the University of Chicago on it through the Alumni Club is open to everyone. So I just want to throw that out there, and that also might be something to consider what Matt just said. How can you incorporate folks that have different degrees on to your board? How can you make sure that you're representing your demographic area well by having someone from law? I know the Dallas-Fort Worth group was very, very focused for their board recruitment to have someone from Pritzker, the law school, Booth College, and having someone that was a master's degree holder on their board, so their board could be the rainbow of the University of Chicago. So that might be something to consider. But I noticed, Gayan, you had a comment to make, and I also really want to just see if we can pull out some best practices or ideas about how to get people involved. I think we just started on it, and whether you're from a small area or a large area, finding new people to do new things, or do something that worked 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, and to enhance it, repeat it, is, I think, a challenge everywhere. So I want to make sure that we hit on that, because that's something that, as a staff person, I get asked all the time. And I want you all to talk about that and maybe talk about your roadblocks or talk about your successes. But
I think Matt's point is very important about kind of engaging all the alums. In smaller communities, it's just inevitable that you're going to find, in Louisville, the predominant alumni base is Booth alums, but if you make it about the University of Chicago, people will come out. And I think his point is really well taken. Engage with a wide alumni set.
Well, in terms of what we do in DC, I know in terms of getting engagement, before we have like a programming meeting every couple months, and I'll go in ahead of time, and when I first started, I would identify like family events, age group, older alum, younger alum, certain age group, and I would do a lot of research before the meeting and have concrete, like, what about like the job freeze coming, would you want to do this? And I think it helps get alumni involved, because, you know, they'll show up a lot of times and say, we want to get a lecture, and you're like, great, put it together, and you realize how much work it takes to put together a lecture. So a lot of times starting with smaller events, saying, why don't you put together a sports event, here's some dates I've already researched, would you like to do this? I think gets people involved, starting small, having concrete ideas at the programming meeting, and then I send out email blasts afterwards to people who either came to the programming meeting, who've planned in the past, who've expressed interest and said, we have these kinds of events already being researched, these kinds of events are open for grabs, are any of you guys interested? So they don't show up for the programming meetings. I think that helps. And then I found having ongoing events, we've gotten some ongoing alumni playing ongoing events, and I think that has helped. having one or two. We have a career, we have a Thirsty Thursday, we have one gentleman who's playing poker events. So I think in terms of starting small with the alumni and having concrete events and doing actually a lot of the research up front, even though it's a pain, lets them, I think is really helpful, because then all they really have to do is like, you know, their planning is really just like Sarah buys the tickets and they show up at the event, and then they feel like they've been involved. So I think that's starting small, and then we get a lot of people coming back. But if you start, a lot of the people who start big and want to plan these huge events, initially usually find that they don't with their schedule, and then they don't come back again. So I find that starting small is good, having ongoing events is good. And one thing that I tried to do was, we got a lot of feedback that people didn't really want events based on like older alum, younger alum. They wanted things to identify with the university, like Scab Hunt, doc films. So we've been trying, or I've been trying to switch my programming focus from, you know, because before we were trying to do things, I wanted things for like lesbians and gays, different, to bring out different groups, and we've been trying to shift the focus. It hasn't been as successful as I thought it would be, but trying to do more like reminiscence of your college experience, which would unite more alum than maybe doing it on the beach. So those are some things we've done.
Those sound like great ideas. They really do. Thank you for that. Yes?
I have more of a question than a comment, but you know, in LA we have a lot of different events, and some of that goes to myself. Like, you know, Crunches is a club called the Magic Castle, and it's very exclusive. People can come. But the problem isn't getting people to the events; it's keeping them connected afterward, because they show up and then they go. So my question is more about how do we build a sense of community beyond just getting them to events? Because if they're just random events and people are showing up, then are we really doing a service to them? Yeah, we are offering a University of Chicago branded event, but it's not connecting the dots to how the university is vibrant in their life, and how that connection is beyond that one-day activity. So that's a question I have more openly for others. How do you build that system? We have book clubs, we have ongoing events, things like that, but within those small pockets, you know, maybe those 9 people have that kind of connectedness, but in the broader community, we don't have that sense of continual community relations in our geographic area.
I think to get people really to build this community, you need people to do something. And with this sense of, I don't know, some projects should be online based with people who can get together all the time and can use like 15 minutes of free time to do something online. And the Drupal system about which we're talking, and there will be this affinity group, roundtable, I understand. This gives this capability. So far, I haven't seen it on the University of Chicago website where we can get together and do something. But this system can allow it. So having some project where people can make an input like 15 minutes on a history page or something. I think they could build this. Any other ideas?
I think that you brought up something good. We've been asking for almost 5 years for a page-to-web page. And I know it seems to be close to fruition, but it's a long time to wait, and it does give people a way to check out what any given club is doing, to find, you know, you can put pictures up from an event, they can see somebody they know went to the last one, maybe they'll get the next one, and that might get them too.
Well, actually, I'm ahead of the curve on that, because I built a website for our club.
So you did your own?
We did our own, because, but, you know, online, we have Facebook, we have, you know, Twitter, but that only goes so far, because it's like, that might get somebody to the event, and then how do I make Joe connected to Mary beyond that, so that way there is that ongoing community, because otherwise, you know, it's great I got 70 people come to an event, but how do those 70 people feel connected beyond?
You would actually do projects and like do things, you know? For example, at my other school, we did 2 projects. One was like history pages. Like if someone remembers some nice event from his past when he was a student, you can just spend 15 minutes, upload one picture, write about this project. And the other people can contribute to other pages. Another project we're doing now is, it's like for cosmetics schools from Russia. And there are many people with PhD programs here. And we are doing, helping him on the job market. We collect their like short information on one page so that alumni could come and see who is on the job market and kind of promote them. So it's a small project that they actually do. It's not just coming to the website and looking for information, but doing something. That's what means the community.
I do agree to some degree. So I'd like to comment the other comment I wanted to about not having fundraising activities. I wonder if that in itself limits opportunities. So for example, I see from my other colleges at UCLA that they have a casino night and people show up, go to the event and a fundraising activity. By not having those opportunities, do we limit opportunities for people that would want to come in with for a good cause?
I just wanted to comment on your first point, and maybe it swings back around to your second point, is I think one of the ways to engage with people is to just sit down with them and say, you can do this for me. One of the things I think we haven't mentioned as a resource, and this is big club, small club, wherever you are. At some point you were new to North Carolina, and you're wondering, what's the best place to rent out for this event, or is that a vegetarian hotel, or can I get this done there? Where can I get 24-hour dry cleaning? Who knows what? And someone knows the area better than you. So one of the things that I had to do, people would say, you know this area really well. Can you help me plan this event? I need to find someone who can cater this event quickly, cheaply. Do you have any connections? And an event as simple as, we're going to do chocolate, we're going to do beer, and we're going to bring in a speaker. Well, we need someone who can do the technology, someone who can provide the space, we need someone who can get the food. And everyone knows people. Everyone's got connections from being around town. And you can go up to people and say, I'm thinking about this event. What do you think about that? Well, I think that sounds great. I think I overheard you say that you work blah, blah, blah over there. Would you happen to know anyone who might be willing to help us out with this? And it's really small. It's really, really, really tiny. They helped you get food for an event. But you need them. I remember moving to Louisville and thinking, well, this will all be really easy. Coming from Chicago, where we just get around the mass transit, everything's pretty simple. I could be driving for 30 minutes. I'd still be in the city, and I'd still be looking for, the alleged place to get sliders. It was like taking me forever. And like grits in the phone book was 3 pages. So, knowing your community is really important. And as well as you know it, you may know a piece of it. And finding other people who can speak to other parts of it, and being able to say to them, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me, pull this out and bring this together for this event? It's already underway. You don't even have to plan it. You just have to help me do this one piece. That's something that I think is really helpful, because once people get a taste of being helpful, they don't want to stop.
We actually have to wrap up. So very sorry to end the conversation. We are actually going to be taking another picture for the entire Alumni Caucus up front in the center courtyard area of the building. So if everyone could head out there, we got flanked on both sides that we need to wrap up. So thank you everyone so much.